Many years ago, a couple told me about a Passover Seder they attended at a friend's home. The table was set beautifully, with the large host family sitting around the Seder table. But when it came time for the Kiddush, they discovered there were no glasses on the table. The hostess called in the housekeeper, who had worked for the family for many years, and berated her in front of the guests. She said to the housekeeper, "How could you be so stupid not to put glasses on the table?" The family did everything right at the Seder, the couple reported to me. They sang the songs, they read the entire Haggadah, the food was spectacular. But that comment to their housekeeper destroyed the Seder for us. Yes, you can tell a lot about people, about how they treat others. But I'm not talking about their friends or co-workers, fellow congregants, acquaintances. You can really tell about someone, about how they treat others who may work for them, those who they see at the grocery store that work there, other people that they may think are beneath them. How do they treat them? Because if we're blessed to have people help maintain our homes, take care of those in need at our homes, if we're blessed to have housekeepers or nannies, care providers for our parents or grandparents, others to help maintain our homes and our family needs, how do we treat them? After I heard about that story about the ruined Passover Seder, I remember a mistake I made many years ago. When my kids were young, we had one particular man who would mow our lawn. Because in my 20 years of owning a home, I've never mowed my lawn once. And this man did a good job on our lawn, but random nights, he'd always show up really late, always after the point I got my kids to bed. And I would get so angry. Why is he showing up at my door again to receive his payment? And he'd show up at my door to receive his payment, and I couldn't write him a check. I always had to have cash. Now, I know none of us keeps cash now, but back then I didn't have always cash with me, and I'd have to tell him to come back and so forth. And I never treated him as kindly as I should have, until I finally had the wisdom to ask him, why did he have to be paid in cash? And why was he always showing up at random times so late at night? And then he explained to me that that was the only time. He was so busy during the day, mowing as many lawns as he could throughout the city of Houston in order to provide for his family. The only time he had was to come at night, because he was working all day. And he had to be paid in cash because he didn't have a checking account. He didn't know how to start a checking account. He didn't know how to go to a bank, maintain a checking account. Now, I wish I could tell you I had the wisdom and kindness at the time to go and help him open a checking account. I didn't, and I regret that. But at the time, I did understand his story, and I realized I was being an idiot for being so rude to him. And that story and that experience reminded me that I needed to be more understanding for all those that Lisa and I were blessed to have and help us maintain our home. And I decided at that point to treat everyone who did work for us and does work for us with extra kindness, with extra compassion, and with extra respect. In our tradition, it's actually a requirement, especially we as Jews who were once slaves ourselves. Can we treat all those who do work at our homes with kindness and compassion? Passover was really an incredible story if you think about it. Not only are we one of the few biblical peoples that are still in existence, we're the only people in the world with an ancient tradition, and a tradition that we boast to the world, that we were slaves. All other traditions in the world don't boast about the fact if their people were once slaves. If anything, they hide that. They talk about that they may have came from gods or from kings or from rich masters or from wealthy people. But we Jews, Avadim Hayinu, we proclaim to ourselves and to the world we were once slaves. And the reason being is to remind ourselves that we have to treat those who aren't paid enough for the work that they do, who work under difficult conditions, who may not be as blessed as we are today, with extra kindness and respect. Because Avadim Hayinu, we know what it's like to be a slave. The great British chief rabbi, former chief rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, may he rest in peace, wrote in his very famous Passover Haggadah, collective freedom, a society that honors the equal dignity of all, depends on constant vigilance. It's easy to say, I'm going to treat others with kindness and respect, but the challenge is acting upon that. Because if we forget from where we came from as Jews, the battles our ancestors fought and the long journey they had to take, then in the end, we will lose our freedom again. Yes, when we are rude, when we are unkind, when we speak in derogatory tones, we don't really fulfill what it means to be a Jew. And for those of us who are parents, our grandparents, we create an awful example for our young. All of us would be appalled if our children treated our domestic workers rudely. So how can we? Can we exemplify the proper treatment of domestic workers for our children? Can we welcome freedom into our homes by looking domestic workers in the eyes and express our gratitude? And can we also consider acting on the courage to see the reality of most situations for our domestic workers? And consider utilizing the ability to see the possibility for change for the poorest right here in our homes? Can we enlist a vision that moves the reality of domestic workers to the possibility of better treatment? Because let's be honest, if we can afford help, we are truly blessed. Have you ever stopped to ask the woman washing dishes in your neighbor's home, what's she being paid? Or the gentleman mowing your friend's lawn about his vacation time? Or the nanny raising the children down the block whether she has time to sit down today for lunch? If you did, you may have discovered an unpleasant situation of inadequate pay, few or no breaks, no paid sick or vacation days, and perhaps even bullying or verbal abuse. But how could it be? Your neighbors, their employers seem so nice, and their domestic workers always seem to be smiling and content. As my colleague, Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, points out, our tradition is very clear. The rabbis of our tradition explain that workers' rights issues may not seem like they are life and death, but they should be treated as though they are. As it says in the Talmud and Baba Metzia, all who withhold an employee's wages, if you don't pay them the day that they work, it's as if you've taken a life from them. And Rabbeinu Yonah says how high the burden is if one chooses to take on an employee. Be careful not to inflict any living creature, whether animal or bird, all the more so. One should not afflict a person who is created in the image of the divine. And one other tradition tells us, if you want to hire laborers and you find that they are poor, they should be regarded as poor members of your own household. How would you treat them if you thought of them as family? Our Torah portion this week, as Jacob beautifully described, Saharat, goes from being not only a condition on one's skin, but perhaps a condition on one's home. And remarkably, this is we would consider some type of plague, maybe mold. If someone found mold on their home, on their walls, and it was growing, the person was commanded to tell the priest. Why? Why would the priest have to get involved? Because the priest would then have to go and instruct the family that their house had to be torn down. If the mold did not get better, the entire house had to be taken apart. Why is that the case? The Midrash gives us an answer. The Midrash says these particular owners, if there's a plague upon their home, these owners have claimed they can't help those in need because they claim they're in need themselves. But when their houses are dismantled, all will see that they had more than enough, that they were actually hoarding, that they had plenty to share with those in need, especially with those who worked for them. Is there more we can all do? My wife Lisa and I have been very blessed to have one woman worked for us for the last 20 years. When my kids were young, she helped us around the house as a nanny. And now she works for us once a week as a housekeeper. And she works for many families in the neighborhood. She's almost like family. And I think one of the best things I ever did years ago is I went to talk to her and I asked her, does she have any type of retirement account? She had none. And she's my age. She's nearing the age of 50. She had no retirement account whatsoever. She worked every week, never was sick, and if she was, she still worked through it because she needed the money to make sure that she could provide food and rent for her family. So I think the best thing I've ever did was I went and I opened a small retirement account for her. It was a very small amount of money for Lisa and me, but for her, it was an incredible blessing. This Passover, what more can you do to help those who may be working for you? Shabbat Shalom and happy early Passover.